All right, so we got a massive post from Scariizard that covered a lot of the unanswered questions that we had about season 4, right? I know that he specifically addressed a lot of the questions that you had in particular, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Very happy.
right at the top there, I'll switch it over to Chrome. We've got the conduits, how those aren't going to be changing. I feel like that's a normally or perfectly fine solution for this,
Yep.
right? I
Yeah.
I don't know if I really wanted to farm conduits again.
I think it's like to some extent having the conduit scale up even more is like some of them do interact with your spec a little bit and like would be more fun, but it's fine the way they are. You're already gonna scale up more with item level and stats from gear and stuff, so it's pretty much fine.
Yeah, and it's gonna be worth some flux on alts to be able to get those right. So that seems like a perfect solution to be able to purchase those. Let's say like I'm on DK tank that I've been playing a little bit. Like I want the 278 conduits still. There's still a meaningful way to acquire them without having to get 3K again.
Right.
Love
Uh
that.
I think they said it was gonna be 10,000 flux though, which is a lot.
That is a lot. I would hope that
I'm
they
maybe
reconsider.
maybe like 1,000 is good. Like maybe it's a typo. I don't know, but yeah, that's my only one little apprehension there so far. But like the concept is fine. I just think the cost might be a little steep for
Yeah.
alts and whatnot. So
Yeah, like the if you look at the other conduits that you're able to purchase in the past, and I understand it's like a lower level conduits, like so you could have 239s or
well,
226s, right? That was
right,
just for small amounts of gold. And then this is like
yeah.
10K flux.
Well, and the annoying thing is there's an item that does the conduits, and I think it does them all at item level 200 from that vendor or whatever. And yeah,
Yep.
it's like 500 gold or something. But it works for every conduit, including the covenant conduits that you are not that covenant. But this item currently only gives you 278 for the covenant that you currently are. You would actually have to buy it 4 times for 10,000 flux to get all of the Covenant conduits at 278. I think the Covenant ones will drop from like Castle Nathria and stuff like that. So you could get them other ways if you really wanted them and you were doing the raids and whatnot. But like theoretically, you're spending 40,000 Cosmic Flux to get all the conduits actually, and they could just make this item work like the other item. I don't know why they didn't do that from the start, but yeah, that's also a minor annoying thing.
Yeah, that just seems extreme. But beyond the 200, they did have 226 and 239s that were available, like the set of them, not just individual ones.
Right.
The sets of them available in I almost said Porthia in Zereth Mortis when you hit like friendly or honored or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool that 278 is at least achievable. I don't know, like I have a lot of flux in my main, but I don't have that much to just send 10K freely, taking the like cut
Yeah, I
off of
think I
my
only have
flux.
maybe like 8,000 flux on my main right now. I think I've sent some to alts to like buy the catch-up gear and stuff like that, but not a ton from what I remember. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But we are going to be getting more from doing the raids next season and stuff like that. It's like 2,000 per week from the raid at least, plus whatever from Mythic Plus. I don't know if they said we'll get them from Mythic Plus or not. I think we will, but I'm not sure. Um, yeah. So hopefully it's like the Korthia change to like anima stuff where you got a significant increase in the amount that you were just collecting weekly kind of automatically. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's not something to worry about, but
And at a fresh season, doing all those dungeons, the end of dungeon reward, like that's a significant portion of flux just in attempting to get ASM or whatever it is that you're doing. I know that
mm,
we'll touch on that later. But one of the other things that doesn't need to be changed is your legendary. It's still just going to be 291.
yeah, I didn't like this part. Um I just think it's really awkward that most people are going to recraft their legendary eventually onto like bracers plus like boots or something, like some weaker slots, maybe belt, I don't know. Um or cloak. And it just feels wrong. I feel like they could have just made some way to upgrade these to a higher item level without having to make a big like cosmic flux cost or a higher crafting cost or whatever, because I don't think they want to increase the gold sink thing. I think they've pretty come out like and said that that was kind of a mistake of Shadowlands overall, especially for I think the lower like more casual player base. Uh, so yeah, it's like it kind of helps them, but kind of doesn't at the same time. And I think they could have done better here. But I understand that they didn't really have a whole lot of like development work going into this season. From what I've heard, it's basically like 2 or 3 people were working on season 4, and that was kind of it. And the rest are all focused on Dragonflight stuff. So, uh, yeah,
Yeah, if that's the price for a better Dragonflight, then I don't mind it personally, right?
it's not the worst thing, but it's just kind of like a weird oddity, I guess.
Yeah, because I think for my shaman, um my like main legendary is currently on my headpiece, and that's eventually going to end up on something else, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
lowest budget piece is, because these are going to be lower eye level than the rest of the stuff that we'll have. Odd concept, and I know it's a little weird just because the way that they made crafting legendaries before was like you would create a lower eye level one, but you'd give it something in the recipe, and that would make it a rank 7, whatever, right?
Yep, the
They
crafter's mark things. Yeah.
the crafter's mark, like if they'd done a newer one of those, they made it to or 311 or 320 eye level, whatever we want it to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would have been reasonable. I do agree with you though, like I think everybody, especially if there was a short tier like this, when sales are minimal, even just the poor casual, right? Like that would be a lot of money to spend. But I know our guild has individually talked about this, and you've touched on it separately. Is the concept of what would it be like if just all of your 291 Legos suddenly became a lot higher, like
Yeah, just do
overnight?
like a backend database change thing. And I think they're already doing that for all of the domination shard items. So it's definitely something possible for them to do. And I feel like they could have just done that and it would have been a better solution. But oh well. Doesn't seem like that's going to be happening now. So
Yeah. But still plenty to be happy about with regards to the currencies. I don't feel like there's anything wrong here, or anything to be frustrated with, like the fact that Cosmic Flux is not going away. Thank goodness. I'm not looking to refarm all of that. It's great to be sitting on the lump sum that I have and just spend it as I please.
yeah, we didn't need
Um,
a fourth currency in this expansion. So
yep,
keeping
yep.
it at 3 is fine with me.
And the fact that Sandworn relics now are account Y, that means that all the characters that I was not as frequently doing dungeons with get their, individual set pieces from season 3 to then upgrade. I can now use those Sandworn relics from a different character to buy a piece to at least turn it into the tier. Granted, it's going to be probably significantly lower eye level, but at least it'll have the 4 set, because that's a massive damage spike for a lot of classes right now.
Yeah, it is also kind of weird where you don't want to upgrade any like season 3 items now to get your tier because they're just going to be you're just essentially wasting the cosmic flux because you're going to have to recraft that tier piece in season 4 at such a higher item level now. Sandworn relics, good change. Should have been in from the start probably, but good change now.
Yeah, and they're addressing how we get rid of our tokens of merit and the season 3 socketing item, which is basically 1k gold per token. So
Mhm.
a season 3 socket item costs 6 of them, 6k gold, simple as that. I think it's also really cool that because it's a shortened season 4, that you will go in and any vault that you don't want to take something from, say like you do have those 3 slots filled out or 3 or more, you'll still get your 6 tokens, but it only costs 3 to get a socket now. So you
Yep.
could have a week where you get 2 sockets. I think that's a really, really good idea. Just speeds up the game a little bit. But I will say there's the interesting tech that people are wondering if this will work, just because it kind of did as we came into this season. The concept of if you at least fill out a vault slightly or have 3 of whatever, you can do mythic 2s, you can do LFR, you could do low rank PvP, like whatever it is that you just fill out 3 options of the 9, that you could go into the season and instead of picking like a season 3 item that you know you're going to replace, take the tokens and have 2 sockets day 1 to put on whatever you want. I think that's interesting. I'm probably going to end up doing that just to be on the safe side, but
I am also going to do that. Yeah, it's not like 100% confirmed that that will work, but I'm hoping it does. I think the change to be only 3 tokens so that you can get 2 sockets in a week where you don't get a vault item. I hot take maybe that should just be the way it always is from now on. I feel like 2 sockets is a lot more of like feels like a better kind of concession choice compared to losing the entire vault for 1 socket. Like 1 socket feels very weak as a backup option, but 2 feels a lot more like reasonable to me. And then yeah, the ability to start the season with 2 sockets so that you drop an item or whatever, and then it's the start of the season. You're probably going to be wanting stuff out of your vault for like several weeks, maybe 6 weeks at least. Probably you're always taking stuff from the vault. Uh, and then if you get a ring in like the first week or your first vault, and then you can't socket it until like the 7th week of the season, that also feels kind of weird. So I think just being able to say, hey, at the start of the season you have 2 sockets, use them whenever you get a piece you want to socket. Like, I also feel like that's just good. Thumbs up. I like that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that also should just maybe be something to take forward into the future.
There's nothing like that fear of putting a socket on an item only to replace it next week, right? So,
Well, and yeah, you
but
can also like let's say I got a normal or a heroic item and I used my socket item on it. I can then later upgrade that item into a mythic item as the same item with the upgrade pieces. Yeah, so you won't ever like waste the socket. You're saying so.
right, and we'll also touch on gearing in a bit, but I guess we could kind of start with the Mythic Plus portion. So they address the fact that you need to time an 18, or I
Mm-hmm.
guess it would be a 19 untimed to have a 15 key in your vault. That's nice, cool. I think everybody's going to be doing that. Um, they did also start to touch on how loot is going to work, especially with the WoD dungeon, because WoD was such a different expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, they specifically say in their bullet, with a few exceptions, old dungeon items are going to retain their original stats when scaling up to Season 4. This means that primary stats on rings from WoD, trinkets with no primary stats, the Mechagon ring, and other unique items from these dungeons will all be enabled. Their intent is for this season to keep as many things from these dungeons as they were where possible. That where possible is pretty important as well. But it's kind of interesting to think about combining a bunch of different seasons, what your Abyss list would be. I know it's a bit different for DPS than healers, but
Mm. Yeah, I've already looked into it. I know for like the hunter specs and stuff, and I think it just comes down to you use the Mechagon rings as a set, and that's about it.
hmm,
That the warlords stuff doesn't really compare, and the rest of the other stuff is just like what trinket is good for you. I think a BFA trinket is one of the best ones, and then the other one is like a raid trinket. So, um, yeah, I think it's just the Mechagon rings are like the important ones for DPS mainly. The other stuff doesn't seem to be that important. I've heard some stuff that there's like certain bracer, I think, for like fire mage that used to be good. I don't know what that item is or does exactly, so that also might be a one-off thing if you have something like that. But uh, yeah, I think overall this is probably not how I would have done it, but like considering the lack of dev time to like maybe go in and custom change these items to be maybe competitive with the current season or whatever, just saying, yep, they're going to scale up, whatever ones are good, and they're staying as is, that's where they end up, is, I guess, fine.
yeah, I think it's kind of a cool approach and almost like a pseudo legendary the way that the bow works for hunters,
Right. Or
where
like the
there's
dagger or the vein rippers and that type of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, interesting enough, they didn't address the vein rippers being having an increased drop, same as the AT weapon, which is interesting. But regardless, it's kind of cool because like I know there's a cloak that's supposed to have like +5% to your critical healing effects or something like that. Like that, I think that's a cool like mini legendary that like people
Yep.
really want. They will seek it. Um, I'm interested to see what the difference in healing is without that. Like what that actually comes down to in HPS numbers and whatnot. But I'm I like the concept that there's more to seek and that they're not all from the same expansion. That's what's important to me. Is it's not like, oh yeah, all of the stuff from Tazavash is the best. There's no reason to do other stuff.
Right.
Thank
I
goodness it's at least
wish
a little bit.
I wish actually more items were like that. Like, it gets boring when you're just comparing, oh, this helm is heavy mastery, low crit, and this helm is heavy mastery, low verse, and this helm is high haste, low mastery. Like, I'm just comparing and just throwing those three in a sim, and like whatever one spits out is the one that I spend my valor on. But it feels so boring to choose between those three. If it was actually like, you want to go in this dungeon because you have a helm that like increases ranged weapon damage or whatever by 2%. It's like, cool. That makes it so I know what the chase item is, and it's a different chase item for like different classes, different specs, and like all that type of stuff. It's not just the same like all the classes who like mastery wear the same helm, woo. And
Yeah.
then um and yeah, it's not, you're not like reliant on a sim to know what one is actually best. It's like you can figure it out yourself. And I think that's something that they've wanted to slowly get away from, is needing to sim like all your items upgrades all the time, and like keep items that are even like, you know, 10 or 13 item levels lower in your bags, because sometimes those will randomly end up simming better because they're in a different like stat distribution and like stuff like that. Like all that stuff is so messy and annoying and boring and uninteresting, and this is a much better way to do it, I think, overall. So I wish more items were had unique effects like that actually, but
Yeah.
it's a lot more time and development and whatnot to implement those things. So I understand why it doesn't happen as much, but over time we do have a lot of like the backlog of items that did have those things in the past. So bringing them forward, I think, is good in
Yeah.
a way that they're doing it.
It'll be interesting to see how that affects the first season of Dragonflight as well, right? Like if they pick, because it's supposed to be 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 old. Like, does that
Mm-hmm.
mean that we're gonna see some of those old ones come back as well? Hopefully, it's a good set of dungeons so that they're not all crummy options, right? That just Dragonflight stuff is better because it had more design time or whatever it was. But I
I
do,
think I read somewhere that they announced what two of the dungeons will be, but I can't remember which ones they were. But I
oh
think they
yes,
announced them somewhere in some interview somewhere like in the past month or two. But I have no idea where I would go to find it. But we'll eventually find out what the whole list is anyway, so it's fine.
right. Doesn't change anything for the time being. But I will say, next bullet point is by far the most important. Mythic Plus end of run items won't be capped week 1 like in previous seasons. Um, this originally was to kind of hinder the world first race a bit, like so that they just couldn't, farm M plus and go in with much higher item level than would be expected, even though they kind of do that through other extremes.
Right.
But this does change a lot. I think you said that a fully upgraded item would be 298 in this
I think
next
so.
season
Yeah.
from Mythic Plus. So you will see some raiders going into week 2 or even a portion of week 1 full 298. I fully expect that, right?
Yep. Uh it does feel a little weird. I think the race to world first like aspect of it uh does make sense, and it what I think that was part of the reason. I also think, and this is more the Valor cap part of it, not the end of run loot cap part of it, but they do kind of play together. Is that I think it was also, you don't want to just invalidate all of heroic loot like the first week, and that this kind of allows that to happen. Like I said, in combination with the Valor stuff. Um, yeah, and it does feel kind of weird that like you're only really going into heroic for the purpose of getting second chances to drop the item to then upgrade it to mythic. It's like almost like heroic is now just like a bonus roll option for mythic loot. It's weird. It doesn't feel normal, and I don't think this part of the season 4 experiment will continue. A lot of the other stuff I like. This is something that I feel like is kind of going to be a once tried thing, and then we all kind of realize, yeah, it just made the gear progression feel wrong, and we'll go back to the old way. I think, and I don't think, because they've said that they aren't going to be doing as much stuff focused on limiting the race to world first teams and guilds and stuff. But I think this is something that actually was just better for the game, even outside of the race to world first. Like I think just guilds wanting to go in and get heroic raid loot the first few weeks of the season and stuff like that is still good. for the game and things like that. It gets people doing AOTC and doing pugs and all that type of stuff. So I think it's just better for the game rather than people. You don't want people to like do 200 Mythic Plus in the first week, burn themselves out of Mythic Plus, never play the entire rest of the season, but have all the M Plus items already. Like it's just completely weird. And then they're only ever doing Mythic Plus for the rest of the season for Great Vault, not for ever any of the Valor or like Mythic Plus items themselves thing.
Just so, I mean, I know your take on dungeons. You just want raid loot. That's kind of how you want to obtain your loot, right?
I enjoy doing dungeons mostly at the start of a season and if there's new dungeons and stuff, but it just gets very old for me when you get to the point of we're just gonna increase the damage and health of everything by 8% and do it all over again. It doesn't. I like the increase of like the mechanical challenge and stuff. Like doing Tazavesh hard mode stuff was fun, and then figuring out how to do Tazavesh like in the time constraint of Mythic Plus is fun. But then once it's just okay, do the exact same thing with the exact same mechanics, but just do 8% more damage, it kind of that's when it gets boring for me. So having new dungeons is actually pretty exciting for me. But
Interesting. Because, um, do you think that you will find yourself just doing all the dungeons, getting the gear ahead of time, or are you still gonna stick with your I'm not gonna do a dungeon, essentially I'm gonna focus more on the raid loot? And I know you just said that, like, you like doing dungeons early on, but I
I
don't think
will.
there were too many pieces in your gear that actually came from dungeons, right? Like you
Yeah, it's mostly the Mechagon rings, like I said. So I'll probably do the dungeons, mainly focusing on the Mechagon stuff to get those rings, and then probably focus on maybe a few slots that would be competitive with raid slots and stuff. Um, but I probably won't go like full 298 is my expectation. I don't know. It depends on how fun I find the season and the Mythic Plus affix and stuff like that, and how many other people are running. Um, like I'll probably do enough to still get like a 3 vault uh every week for the most part for at least the start of the season. Um, but I don't think I'll be like trying to get 298 in every single slot in the first week thing. Probably
interesting. Because and
kind of a
then
middle ground, I guess.
And then to the point that you made a little bit earlier about like how when dungeons just increase by percentages, like it gets boring, right? Just do more
Hmm.
damage. But I think it's interesting on the other end of that. So like I started to do a little bit of push keys. Like I mean I did a 27 this season or something like that, which is
Hmm.
a lot higher than I'd ever considered because the before this season all I cared about was 15s, right? I just there
Yep.
was no reason to get a certain score for me. But I tried it, and what it did was it made certain certain dungeons a lot harder, and certain aspects of them that you had to play better mechanically. So
Hmm.
here's a
That
good
is true.
here's a good example is Theater of Pain. I'm a stupid priest, and there's the leap that one of the bosses does. The Zav is the name of the boss where he throws
Yep.
like 2 DPS down to fight, right?
Yep.
When he leaps like just to the center of the room before he does his combos where he'll do like a frontal, he'll do a cone in front of him, and then he'll also do like this big ring around him, right?
Hmm.
And he'll like alternate. But when he does that jump, you don't think about that at all. Like it just kind of happens in a 15 and in a 20. But at a 27, that leap will kill you. So you have to play around that. You have to plan your defenses around that. I had to have a fade up for every single one. If I didn't, I became an angel, and it was something
Hmm.
to be mocked. But it was funny. Like I enjoyed the experience. The very first time I died to it, I remember I lost my mind. I might have cussed a little bit and asked what it was that actually killed me. And when I was
Yep.
told it was just the jump, I was like, oh, I just have to play better. So it kind of opened my eyes to a different side of the game where I thought mythic rating was really really tough, and compared to a really really high key with a coordinated group, I would say that these are tougher. In a raid, like you have to rely. I know, like we're going very far off topic, but in a raid, you have to rely on how others perform, but in a key, like you kind of know what's going to happen, and it's a bit more personal responsibility, I would say.
Right. So I guess the way that I could maybe make the comparison as best as I can is if you can imagine we just like got CE and whatever, Imagine if now we unlocked Mythic Raid +1 and you just went back in and you had to kill all the same bosses with just like 5% more HP or 10% more HP. Like, would that feel as satisfying as going from heroic to mythic in terms of a DP or a difficulty like change? And to me, it's like mythic +1, where all the bosses have 5 or 10% more HP, is just not really satisfying to do all over again, if that makes sense. And that's how I kind of see Mythic Plus. It is
Ye-
true that you do have to play better on those bosses, and you do have to pay attention to certain mechanics more than others. Um, and you'll be dealing with maybe more mechanics than others. You know, you can't just like phase the boss before he does a certain mechanic anymore or whatever. Um, so it is true. You do make good points, but
Well,
yeah.
it's also about how Mythic 1 rating whatever would be with the reward system for that. I think that's a big driving factor as well. But I hear you about the experience. I'm just saying, like, right now, if you do a 27, you're still getting the same loot that somebody in a 15 or 16 or whatever could get.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm interested to see if
If
they
it gave me better loot,
change.
I would be a lot more incentivized to do it.
Well, yeah, but
But
it's also
I,
like,
I I also like loot is a vehicle for me to be able to compete in like parses and stuff like that mostly. It's and I really like the feeling of a character like getting this basically and like being done and finished, and then I can focus on other stuff, and I know that I can't improve that character anymore, and that's when I can like fully focus on just the gameplay kind of at that point. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
So if they increase the like reward system beyond say 20s or beyond 15s to better incorporate the higher end scene or something like
Hmm.
that, or maybe I mean, what are the things that they could do? Like if you complete a dungeon at a certain key level, you have a chance at receiving a dinar going forward that you could use towards a raid piece of loot or something like that. I know.
Or I just think like I don't know, let's say maybe 25 is too high, but like if you clear all 25s, whatever score that is, like you unlock the ability to valor upgrade uh your pieces to 278 or like, you know, the equivalent of mythic item level basically. Or maybe like yeah, you get a dinar that like you can upgrade 1 or 2 mythic plus pieces to 285 currently, you know, like the higher item level end of uh end boss stuff. Like I think something like that should exist. I don't see a reason why it shouldn't. Um, because yeah, I think those things when you're doing 20 to 25, that's like a big difference too. It's not just 20 to 21. Like I think at certain checkpoints like that, you could unlock the ability to meaningfully impact the way that your character like works and what gear is important to them and like that type of stuff. And you can that's a way that you could focus on like making Mythic Plus gear more relevant to Mythic Plusers, and they don't have to focus on doing raid as much. And the same for raiders. Like if they only want to focus on raid and they know that they're not going to be doing 25s, like they don't need to care about the Mythic Plus loot as much or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think both of those could exist. It's not doesn't have to be one or the other, and I would be fully on board with that. I don't know that I would do it or not. 25s are probably around where my current Mythic Plus skill level probably caps out. But I could see myself doing it for a few certain items if they were Biss or something for sure. So
well, it's interesting though because you did touch on your interest in the parsing culture where you want to be bissed out, and you don't know if that you would do this. But would you enjoy this system so much if now your blues and purples suddenly became grays and greens because you don't have that high eye level gear? Like I know we're not pushing anything incredible in terms of ranking right now, like because this is a mid uh mid ranking podcast essentially, like among the CE groups, right? That's
mhm.
the intent of it. But it's a good question because like in Sepulcher, we would have had time for one, maybe two reclears
Mhm.
for this whole season, relative to much higher ranked guilds that have killed Jailer 20 times or something like that, right? So,
Right.
um,
I
if
think it's a little less than that, maybe like 10 to 15, but yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, but you see, my point is that like, would you enjoy it if that system were actually there, but you just wouldn't be able to obtain it as reasonably?
I'm not sure because I feel sort of similar to like there's been PvP trinkets and stuff like that that are competitive sometimes, and generally my thought is like I don't want to put in the effort even if it's like technically Biss to get that PvP trinket just because PvP is kind of an area of the game that doesn't interest me that much, and it's like, could I probably learn it and get good enough to get that thing? Probably, but the the time and effort required is just not worth the reward, I guess. So I don't know. I don't have a clear one way answer because there's definitely cases where the answer is no, and there's definitely cases where the answer has been yes. And I don't really know what the separating factor is between those. But
Well, I will tell you from kind of at some point at least starting to experience the different levels of the game, right? Like getting flat a long time ago, clearing CE now, and then starting to push keys. I will say that the experience of learning something might not be something that you're factoring in, but I actually think it's a very enjoyable aspect of the game.
oh yeah, I generally get my enjoyment of learning new stuff from playing other games rather than playing like the PvP game inside World of Warcraft.
Interesting. Okay. Fair enough. Well, besides that long tangent, we
like
can
like
finally.
I became obsessed with TFT for like 2 weeks,
That's right.
you know.
That's right.
So because a new set came out and that was a brand new thing to learn. So yeah, that's kind of just a comparison.
EFT, okay. But we can move forward to rating now. The
Yep.
main aspect of the podcast, I would say. So Mythic rating launches with no delay. So Tuesday morning, Mythic Raid will go live, at least in the NA realms. Um, and Cross Realm rating will actually still be live because there won't be a Hall of Fame for Season 4. I think this is a great change. I hope that this is working towards keeping that because there's nothing worse than splitting up or not taking on trials or whatever, what have you, because of Cross Realm not being a thing until the Hall of Fame is cleared.
Yep. I think uh cross realm rating should just be always a thing going forward for Dragonflight and stuff. Don't tie it to the season or don't tie it to the Hall of Fame at all. Um, I don't know whether you want to keep Hall of Fame the like top 100 Alliance guilds and top 100 Horde guilds or top 200 of both combined in whatever order. I don't know if Horde and Alliance guilds even make sense in a world where you have cross faction stuff and hopefully guilds become cross faction in Dragonflight, like maybe the first patch at the latest or something. Um, but yeah, just make rating allowed to be cross realm, please,
Yeah, yeah.
from now on.
Well, I like the experiment. I kind of want to take it towards the cross realm and cross faction guilds. I don't think it would be that bad to have a cross realm guild necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of barriers to it, for sure. But
If it's technically possible, I would want that too. There might be like weird tech reasons why they don't do that, but
cross faction guilds entirely
absolutely.
reasonable. Something that should be done soon to make sure that this doesn't flounder in any way, right? That's the only way I could see it becoming a problem.
Yep.
Um,
The word they used when they announced cross faction was seamless. They wanted it to be a seamless experience between the
that's
two
true.
factions.
That's true.
And guilds are currently a seam. And I do not want that seam to be visible and disruptive anymore. So get rid of the seam, please. The end.
Right.
This has now turned into a tailoring podcast. I don't know.
They did release tailoring, like the
Profession stuff.
transmog, yeah, the stuff for
Yeah.
that. But another important thing is the raid skips for season 4, particularly that we've earned, will be usable. So I don't think this is a bad idea. I think this gives the raiders that have the shot at killing those later bosses a better shot at killing them in the week. I think
Hmm.
this also further would invalidate any rankings whatsoever. Like they already talked about how there's no Hall of Fame for season 4. They're also making it so that any
True.
guild that can just skip and go to
I
Sire
I
faster.
wonder what the prices will be in the first week of season 4 for people who have like a Castle Nathria skip on Mythic and stuff like that.
Oh, that's so
Because
true.
a lot of those people like uh might not be playing anymore and stuff like that. Or like a lot of people might be coming back and they didn't play Castle Nathria and stuff like that. Like I wonder if there's gonna be a whole market for people who have the skips. Then that will
Yeah.
be funny. Little mercenaries just going into their raids just to open skips for people.
Wonder how much of that is on their radar, the concept of selling a skip. But regardless, I think it's a cool change. I like it because I think that you and I will be able to reasonably compete at a level where we'll be able to go from Shriekwing to Sludge Fist to SLG and a Sire, hopefully
Hmm.
all in the same first week, like obviously barring some insane tuning. But you and I both don't have the skips for them, right? Like we both
I
experienced Nathria with a guild that didn't re-kill Sludge Fist enough
Oh, you're
times.
right. I don't have the Castanethria skip, maybe.
Yeah, it was a
Oh,
cool way to get it as well. Have it for no
I forgot that
reason.
entirely because I deleted it from my quest log.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Okay.
But
Well,
um, cool. Raid skips. Like the thought. Like that it invalidates any form of like the Hall of Fame or any rankings. Like I like that that's not going to be a thing, and if it's going to be one of those memes where like somebody refers to their parse on Terragru, it's like, dude, you just got the good powers. Calm down, right? like it doesn't
I
matter.
I got
Nobody's gonna
Faded
care.
World first on Sledgefist.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
good for you, buddy.
exactly. And it's also really interesting to think about is that there is a much more even playing field this time around. Like looking at the world first level, I think Liquid's already come out said that they're going to play from the crack of dawn whenever
Yep,
servers go live.
yep.
What? How interesting it would be if they didn't kill Sire first or kill some of these bosses first when they're trying for it. Like this season they obviously a different guild other than some of the top guilds killed Vigilant Guardian because it just wasn't worth the
Yep.
time spent. But
Right.
they did
Forgot
it.
about that.
They went above and beyond and they killed it, right? And that was a cool little bit of fame for them. But now, like you could see some of these lower ranked guilds technically passing ahead. I would be shocked, but I'm saying like top world 10 could see the 10th or whatever taking over the first for killing a couple of these bosses. Who knows, right?
I think it's pretty likely that like a non-liquid guild, for example, gets the Faded World first. I'm gonna just say that for the sake of it. On Sylvanas and Jailer, I think Liquid's going to get it on Sire though, and the reason is I think for Sylvanas and Jailer, Liquid's probably just going to go into those with like two carries and just sell it on the Faded week, and just
That's true.
be selling mounts or whatever. But Sire doesn't have a mount, and I don't unless they're going in split rating on it just for the sake of gear. Uh, then they still might not be first compared to like some other guild. But if they're playing like their main roster of people and they have geared characters and they're not like carrying sales, I feel like it's a pretty safe bet that whoever goes in first is going to be able to like I think all of the bosses will take like less than 3 pulls for those type of so like they might have one or two wipes, quick wipes on something, but
Yeah. It'll be really interesting. I'm, excited to watch stuff, but we'll see as all of it comes to pass, right? I feel like it will be done before EU servers go up and
yep.
all that. So I might be at work when the bosses are killed, and I'll just watch a little video because there's not enough hype around it. But I'm hoping that it does start to build the hype further for Dragonflight. That's my opinion of it, at least. I
Mm.
know that
I'm I'm mostly watching so I can see what the affixes look like and what they even do because I still feel like we have kind of very little information to go off on those. But
yeah, we will touch on those in a bit. But another item very, very dear to your heart, the legendary hunter weapon, Ray. Oh, I'm not gonna try to pronounce it. Never mind. Just the Sylvanas bow.
okay, I
Yeah,
think it's Racialare, something like that.
yeah.
Um,
Well, give him shit in the comments, but
oh, please
the
do.
it's not gonna be purchasable, and I know
Yeah,
you'll probably want to touch on this a little bit yourself. But
I at first I would have said that I was like a little mad and upset, but actually the longer it got on and we didn't have more information, the more I came to acceptance and I actually decided that it makes more sense for them not to put it on the vendor. Um Basically, I think they want it to be a cool moment when you drop the item in raid and you get excited and you're excited to kill Sylvanas because you have the chance of dropping the item. It takes a lot of the fun out of it if you just go to a vendor and buy it off the vendor. So that part makes sense to me. If you already got it I think you shouldn't have to do that hoping all over again because you already did it and probably already spent a lot of time killing Sylvanas multiple times. Um,
Well, they address that in a bullet. They say for players that already have the
yes,
bow, an item will be purchasable for the broker vendors that will bring its item up to 285.
which is awesome, especially for me because I'm still using 272 at the end of Sepulchre in season 3. So yeah, that's just a big old upgrade for me. Because I kept it in my bank. Because I was smart and knew this. I think also it's pretty likely you could item restore it. If you had deleted it or sold it for some reason. But
Oh,
like,
I know
come
some
on,
hunters that are doing that.
you're supposed to keep the item. It's a legendary. It's like a trophy case thing. Anyway, and then yeah, so then she's still able to drop the bow. They increased the drop rate, and then if you already have the bow, either the old one that you upgraded or a new one that drops, then you'll also be able to drop the item level upgrades from Sylvanas as a replacement, and then upgrade it to like the higher item levels above 285 to like whatever two or I guess three something, 301 and then like 311 something like that. Um, I don't know why they made the change to the rogue daggers specifically and not some of the other items. I think it's just
Yeah,
because rogues are the only ones that drop the dagger, I guess. Whereas there's multiple classes that drop like Jathis and the mace and stuff
true.
like that. So
Yeah.
like that's the only thing I can come up with, but I don't know.
I
But
mean,
then also there's the hunter cloak and that doesn't get an increased drop rate, but that also only drops for hunter. So I have no idea. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
some
Just weird decision there, but okay.
special items that could use a little bit more consideration, but should be told short season. Like
Overall, this is
I'm
a pretty good solution that I'm generally happy with, I think. So,
I agree. And Shoot Sane has a chance at actually getting the bow now,
oh
which is
boy,
cool.
shoot Sane.
Yeah, Shoot Sane
Let's
might
go.
be there for sales. We'll have to see. There's
Nice.
5 healers or 6 healers, something like that. So need to run less. But so what else? They're making a series of balance changes. So to sum all those up very quickly, their goal was to make sure that you don't take a trinket, say an IQD or whatever, something from the other
Right.
side that's not from this relevant tier, this season 4 tier essentially,
Yep.
bringing that from season 3 into season 4. That's a bad thing to do, and I'm glad that they're making these changes to adjust to it. But I will say, I'm going to make a small anecdote that should probably be addressed, at least for PvP. We don't talk about PvP too much, but it's a big thing. Is that
Okay.
running IQD is actually really important in PvP because you can use it in such a versatile manner, but alongside another PvP trinket.
Oh, because it also has a CC break, doesn't it?
Well, so it's not the one that you're thinking of. So the second trinket that you would run is the one that reduces the amount of time CC is on you,
Okay.
because you can't use two of the same effects. But it's
Okay. So
interesting
those would share a
because,
cooldown, but they're two separate effects, so they don't. I
but
see.
and there's also some CC that IQD can't get you out of, but it can also be a miracle heal and all that stuff. Like it
Yep.
doesn't matter what eye level that is. That's still gonna be good, right? So
Interesting.
something for consideration. I hope that they at least look at it.
Is it? Have people been using that instead of the? It used to be verse, but now it's like just a flat stamina. I think also primary stat increase from
Yep.
the two PvP trinkets. People have been using IQD over that
Um,
set bonus.
Healers have been significantly, and
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
entirely reasonable if you're a holy priest that's unkillable to still do that, right? So
Hmm.
just because that's been the meta for so long, or at least this particular season. But I digress. Separate topic entirely. Just a little thing off my chest about that. But I do like what they're doing. I like that they're trying to make, and on top of that, I don't know if it's addressed specifically in here. I'm not going to read it too quickly, but they do also want to buff some trinkets that were in raids that were not so great, right?
Yep.
So you'll see. I'll switch over to the actual patch notes here, and I might be able to scroll down and find those really quick. But there's just some other items that are being buffed. So Old Warrior Soul haste granted per stack was reduced by 10%. This was to avoid using like an older Warrior Soul. Old
And
Warrior
older.
Soul. Oh my
Yep.
goodness. But then they're also like buffing other things. So Like Resonant Silver Bell is a good example. This is just a healing trinket that's comes off of I want to say KT. It's just not good. Oh yeah, it's got to be KT because it's Spectral Feline that like heals an ally. That makes sense for KT based on lore. But um, it's just not as good, and so trying to make it so that because you're seeing certain items far less, that they're bringing up these worse items. Like another good example, like Council of Blood trinket, where you have to like do a certain dance or something like that.
Yep.
That's getting buffed to some degree. So I like this concept that they're trying to make some of these other items more competitive. Will that actually be the case? I would be shocked. Also, there's this like unique barrier where, if I'm sorry, Unbound Changeling, like in this particular patch, is much better than something else, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. People are going to want to run that Unbound Changeling regardless, even if it's only showing up once every 3 weeks in the loot pool. So I like that they're doing this. I don't feel like there's going to be much of an effect, though.
I think this is mainly also just meant to be, I don't know what I would even call it, sort of a band-aid fix to the holdover time where you have not spent your dinars yet to get the trinket that you actually want or something. And this is just to make the meantime feel better when you're using maybe not your ideal best trinket. You're using like you said, a different backup one or something. Um, Overall, I think these changes are good. I don't know that they'll actually change the trinket balance significantly, realistically. It just maybe brings some alternatives up closer to the top ones, which I think is fine. It, I think, makes some of these trinkets, some of them were already viable, and now they're just still viable, maybe even, staying viable in now a later season. So, seems fine. Um, the biggest thing that worries me of all of them is the Scars of Fraternal Strife from Jailer,
Yeah,
because they increased that one a lot, and that's the one that's probably the most questionable whether you'll actually want to use or not, whether it's worth the increase in stats. And I think it might be worth using as a BIS trinket now for people. And so that potentially scares me a little bit. But that's maybe like a late season 4 farm type of thing. Probably not in the first weeks that you'll have to worry about that when you're still gearing up and things like that. So, but
yeah.
I did think that was a little funny and a little bit, it made me a little bit concerned, but it's fine.
As a quick note, the fear of us chain wiping on, say, Jailer, and then having another pull where somebody died through their scars, slowing them, and them not getting the bomb hole, for example, would be really frustrating.
Purely hypothetically, of course. Break would
Yes,
never do such a thing.
never. We run speed gems, but that's a different story. So just covering it from the top though of the patch notes, first thing they actually talk about are the different uh affixes that we're gonna have in raid. There
Yep.
are the four listed here, so we can kind of cover those just slightly. Granted, we don't fully know what these are like, and we'll kind of try to give our first thoughts on them, whether or not they would be good to play with, bad to play with, what specific aspects we'd want to see. But the first one that's noted is the Creation Sparkin. We don't know if that's going to be the first one out on the first week, but given it's the first one listed, similar to how Castle Nathra was the first raid, who knows? Maybe we just go off of that, right? Because they are listed here and they aren't in alphabetical order, so something to note. But the Creation
Well,
Spark, go
I
ahead.
also think different bosses, like it might be that all four of these are active every week, and it's just different bosses have the different power thing too. Like I don't know that it's the same affix across the entire raid on all bosses. I think it might be different
That
each
would be
boss too.
good. I would enjoy that. As long as it doesn't change pull to pull. Thank goodness that would be
That's true, big true.
yeah. But so the Creation
Retweet
Spark
on that.
target targeted players become charged with cosmic damage over time. When this magic dispellable aura is removed, Creation Sparks fly off and impact the ground. This can explode if no player is there to intercept it. But if they do, they're rewarded with a powerful faded infusion, increasing the flow of time and the movement speed of any player within the radius. So this will be really interesting to see. I'm imagining the Protect Mr. President debuff that we have at the end of the Jailer, where
Okay.
it's a damage
Yep.
over time effect. It's ramping up. You want to dispel them. but you also want to make sure that you're dispelling them at a reasonable time where the buff is more potent, and then you're dispelling it, and it looks like it's going to give it to anybody within a certain radius. So you'll have two players, then like two tankier players, I'm assuming, or if it's your mic is sputtering. But
Oh,
if you here, I'll just mute that for time being. If you have like say two debuffs fly off, you want to give that to two like reasonable players that will survive. Maybe you give them to Boomkins. They just don't die. Maybe you give them to Shamans because we're just very tanky in general. But um, regardless, you'll have this kind of little area. It looks like that might act like an buff, but also mixed with the speed of a woe. Who knows? We'll have to see how much that's actually in effect. It might not be an buff. It could be more like a Vi where you just haste instead. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this affix?
yeah, I think it's similar to where the flow of time is like, they used this mechanic in some of the Legion bosses, where it was basically like time passes faster. So it was kind of like your GCD was lower, like it was haste, but the and your cooldowns were lower, but it was more because like time was passing faster for you, if that makes sense. And so relative to each other, like your cooldowns and your rotations still played the same. It was just like accelerated kind of. This giving a movement speed buff means I can play the Scars trinket and still make it to my bomb
No.
hole.
No.
And um I'm also worried on, let's say, a boss like Sledgefist, when you're chained up to people, and
Oh
now people are
no.
wanting to go run to a spot on the ground. That could seem a little bit sketchy. So that's why I'm saying, like, some of these affixes might not be built for certain bosses, and hopefully they don't allow those to overlap in a bad way, because that would be the way that these bosses become actually more difficult than they are intending them to be, I think.
Yeah, I hope we don't find any of this, especially in the first week when people are returning and they're trying to see how cool it is, and if it goes poorly, right? Like that first
Mm-hmm.
week, Castle Nathria being arguably the better of the three raids, or at least uh, maintain people's interest for those returning.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that they get this right. But we can move on to the other one, reconfiguration emitter. Enemy appears which continually casts, so I'm thinking a little bit like Lords of Dreadad, right?
Yep.
Inflicting cosmic damage to all players if successful. Over time, this enemy gains energy and increased damage done, and when defeated, grants a Fated Infusion, which increases mastery, crit, verse, and avoidance, not haste, based on the enemy's energy value. So the more you can tank it, the better you'll do. So I could see this being significantly cheesed on, let's say, an easy boss like what's incredibly easy, Shriekwing, right? There's not too much to get to worry about. So you can commit your healing cooldowns to this instead so that it lives longer, and then you kill it off and you get a bigger buff, right? I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that could be pretty cool to make some of these, lazier bosses a bit more fun. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Um, well, just as a general thought to start with, is they did have Sepulcher have like bosses that weren't tested. So these affixes not being tested, like, I feel like the only way they would do that is if they felt pretty confident that they would work out okay. So I'm generally optimistic on how they will be, and I think they're intended to be more fun than frustrating. Like, they're not intended to significantly be like a difficulty thing. They're more intended to be like, hey, get some free stats and go do some big damage and kill the boss. I think they're meant to be pretty helpful to the players. As for this specific mechanic, it feels kind of boring to me that it's kind of like a mechanic that you don't really interact with at all until you want to kill it, and maybe it has a big health bar that you'll want to actually be cleaving it the whole time or something. But if it's easy to kill and you just don't touch it the whole time, it feels kind of weird. And then it's also like you have to play a weird balancing act of like, do we kill it and let it ramp up the whole time in a fight like Shriekwing or whatever, and then we only kill it when like Shriekwing is at 10% HP and we play 90% of the boss without any buff? Or is it better to like kill it halfway through and we get, only half as good of a buff, but we have it for like 5 times longer because we have it for 50% of the boss instead of only 10%? So like there's a weird balancing act you have to do, um, that probably needs math people to do or something that I haven't quite figured out. But it also seems weird to me that there's not like a clear like this is when you need to kill the ad and this is when you need to stop killing the ad, because I feel like it will also just depend on your healing cooldowns. Then it's also like, are you gonna be bringing like 6 or 7 healers to a boss just to like giga buff your DPS even harder? But
Yeah,
then none of those healers have anything to heal once this is dead. Like I don't know, it just gets weird. So like this one is one where I feel like could be weird in practice, but hopefully it's fine. But I can foresee issues with this one. The first one I think just seems like pretty basic and is going to be fine, like no matter what. But this one has some weirdness to me.
yeah. It's gonna be like very important to see which boss is actually a thing on. Because like imagining this on Rygolon, for example, that's gonna be a really tough fight to heal. If you've got a Lords of Dread ad on Rygolon, um, you'd want to kill that off pretty quick. But I guess that's like one of the options they're saying, right? Is like if you don't want to interact with the um like if you wanted to kill it off super early and not really experience that much of a buff, that's technically an option to you, right? You could almost experience it without the affix entirely. But I don't know how frequently they'll spawn or how that's gonna work. But the
Right.
next one,
Like, does it spawn multiple times? Is it only at the start of the fight once? Like, yeah, that kind of depends.
all these questions that will be answered on Tuesday, I guess, when
Yep.
watching people pull it. But Protoform Barrier infuses a powerful enemy to inflict cosmic damage to players. When removed, this power manifests as an enemy who shields all enemies in an area for a short period of time, sharing the pool of shielded health. Players may additionally heal a secondary unit to contribute against this pool. If this shield breaks, damage and healing done to shielded enemies is inflicted upon them, and players are granted a faded infusion, increasing total health, damage, healing, and absorbs done based on how much that player contributed. So I think this is a cool way for at least healers to better interact with this, where they can feel
Mhm.
like they're more contributing. So from a healing aspect, I'm excited for this. Um, I don't know. I very much just want to see how it plays out, but I like this one almost the most.
This one could also be weird if you're wanting to intentionally like have people not contribute so that other people contribute more and get buffed more. It's like kind of the PI issue in a modified form, and so that might be weird. Hopefully, it doesn't end up that way. Hopefully, it's just everyone AoE the ads, you all get a massive buff. The end. But there's probably some people that are going to abuse this in some way. I'm sure people will be figuring weird stuff out with some of these, but uh, in concept, I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting
I
how
don't know
this
that it's
is.
I don't know that it's my favorite though. It just feels kind of not really much interaction to do from a DPS perspective. It's kind of just like you AoE some ads and then you get a buff.
Yeah, as a healer, I like the fact that I could
I like that
contribute.
it's good for healers though. Yes.
I I do think this will like what fully like these affixes are gonna fully ruin any form of parse culture, right?
Hopefully, maybe,
Entirely.
probably, who knows?
I don't know. But then on the last
We'll
one,
find out.
Chaotic Essence, summon an orb which defeats all players, but may be
I
interacted
think
with.
I think that is wrong, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, this activates the foe, which spawns additional enemies for a short period of time. For each one slain, more spawn, and after the window of time, players are rewarded with another faded infusion, increasing damage, healing, and absorb stun, stacking for each enemy defeated. So, um, this summons an orb which defeats all players. Could be a time thing where essentially you have to click this at some point before the 3 minute mark, right? Like you know that's gonna happen. It's up to you to pick when is best for it. I don't know, but
Yep.
I feel like this is gonna be one of those where there's just gonna be an ideal scenario for a given boss, and you just run with that one, right?
Yeah, it feels like a thing. It basically you just click it when people are AoEing already on a boss, like when Wild Spirits is getting used or whatever. Like I don't know. I don't really understand this one much, but
Yeah,
I think the description on it is probably wrong in a couple places. So I don't know.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see like which of these are applied in the first week. You know, does it make any of the easier bosses significantly harder for whatever reason, or a hell of a lot easier? We don't know, but we'll see. That's kind of the take I have on the faded powers is like we'll see before we actually judge them. You know.
When you brought up the parse culture type of thing, I was curious if you wanted to mention the polls that Warcraft Logs has been doing the past few days or the past
They
week. I don't know if you've
have,
watched
yeah,
those at all.
they have. They've been asking how PI wants to be addressed going forward. Um, I'm interested where you fell on the spectrum for that though. Like, were you one that wanted separate, you know, rankings for that? Where did you stand?
Yeah, I was basically in the camp of wanting. I just want some form of rankings where I can see people that had no PIs at all and compete only against other people in that situation. Um, whether the other, PI allowed category has like a limit of like whatever certain buffs per minute limit, or whether it's just you can have 60 buffs if you want because you're in a Chinese guild and you're the one guy getting every single buff in the entire raid. Um, I don't really care at that point. I feel like it's just different degrees of the same uncompetitiveness, but who knows? Um, I think they've also said they weren't wanting to do two entire separate rankings because of like the database uh, processing requirements for that. But then he also said because Mythic is such a low percentage of the player population that they could maybe do it. He just said this earlier today. Um, that they could maybe do it for Mythic logs only and the Mythic rankings only, and Heroic would still be everything together. Which like Heroic logs are kind of a joke anyway that aren't really seen as competitive. So I think that's fine. That's a really good compromise that I think he should do. Um, I'm still in the camp of PI shouldn't exist as haste. Should just be a damage buff or something in Dragonflight, and this problem doesn't need to exist in the first place, and it's just annoying. But yeah,
You just upset so many heroic parsers. It's actually insane. But
I do heroic parses, but after they're like somewhat competitive in the first like 3 weeks of a tier. After that, it gets uncompetitive really really fast. Like people start on Vigilant Guardian, it's like they're the only person AoEing in their entire raid of 30 people, and so they get like 20k DPS while the average person gets like 12k or something. And so it's like it just becomes super cheesy super fast basically. Mythic eventually gets to that point really late in a tier, but it's competitive for much longer at least.
yeah, whenever I'm doing well on logs like that, it kind of makes me realize, yeah, this is not competitive. It shouldn't be if I'm doing well, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was my example of past tiers, not this one, just 'cause this was such a short one. I didn't really. Yeah, I realized actually this tier, I didn't really do any heroic. Like I had no interest in pugging. I don't know if it was the bosses or the tier
Yeah,
or what,
I was gonna
but
say once we got our tier set items from Heroic, there was kind of like no real need to go back in there.
well,
Maybe if you
even
wanted a certain trinket or something, but I mean that was kind of it.
I think it was the creation kettles as well. It's like I just
Yeah,
had no reason to go into the raid, whereas last season I did
yep.
on alts
You
to try to
needed to
get
get
the
your Stygian Embers. Gotta upgrade
yeah.
those stomp
Oh
shards.
my gosh, all that. But happy to be past that. Looking at the faded raid rewards. This is going into the whole puzzling cartel dinar system where you're gonna
Hmm.
have three. I think you said that it was gonna be probably getting your first like a couple weeks in, and your goal should be your third at like 4.5, maybe 5 weeks into the tier.
I think that's what they said somewhere else previously.
Yeah, so that seems like a and these the dinar is used for purchasing a what will be normal eye level piece of gear, but specifically would be for trinkets, weapons, and unique items from all three raids.
Yep.
So
I don't know if the cloak is on the vendor, the hunter cloak, but then you have stuff like the um I guess it's a ring already, but I was gonna say the priest or the DK ring from like Anduin. Um, items like that. There's maybe one or two other items that I can't think of right now were unique.
right, and the other aspect to it is when you're killing heroic or mythic fated bosses that fated week, you're going to receive a confounding cipher of the appropriate difficulty, and then if you get 20 heroic or mythic ones, it gives you a creation impetus, which upgrades a so you lied earlier about different currencies. Like there's more currencies now, but
Yeah, that's true. They
but
got me in the end.
but this creation impetus, which can upgrade a fated item to heroic or mythic quality. This doesn't necessarily need to be purchased or used on the one you got from the dinar though, right? So like you could get
It it probably should, the mythic ones at least probably should be, but the heroic ones don't need to be for sure. Yeah.
yeah. We'll have to see how this system plays out. I think I've continuously said I am just so fearful of, you know, I'm the type to like save and just kind of make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And so maybe I wait like 6 weeks in and I'm like, okay, it's time for me to get a hymnal, Wallace hymnal. And I grab it. And then just that next week, seventh week or whatever, and one drops on Mythic Sire. And I'm just really sad, you know?
Yep. Yeah, I feel like there was still a better way, or there is a better way to do this type of system in the future, but hopefully they take the lesson of this is good, this is needed, people like this system, we just want it in a better way next time, rather than like people don't like this new system, go back to RNG gear only kind of thing. I hope that's the message that gets across, because I think people are really on board for this and they really want it to work out in the way that uh makes everybody's life easier and better basically and more fun for the gearing up process and stuff like that, but there is still some issues with the way it's currently being done, but I think they can make some tweaks and make it basically perfect in the future, and hopefully we get that for Dragon.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I would like that. Um, what else is covered? The new affix, which, I've heard that based on tuning could be really, really difficult. Could be incredibly easy. We'll have to see. But
Mm-hmm.
the time being, it's just another affix. I think it's difficult to actually compete with encrypted. I think a lot of people actually loved encrypted. The
Yeah.
by by Urwo affix that we had this season. Dungeons are definitely gonna feel slower after that's gone. So I like that this is another one where it's ramping. Like you might get
Yep.
based on what you choose, you could like have really, really high crit rating. Almost feels like pseudo corruption that you're working towards in the dungeon, but you can choose how much you actually want to interact with it. Like if you don't want to pull those packs that have them, just don't, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
as simple as that. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to trying out Shrouded. I can't believe it's gonna be here in just a couple days,
It feels
honestly.
like a better version of the Tormented season 2 affix, where there was like lieutenants and you got the Torghast powers and stuff like this. This just feels like a simpler, better way to do it, and I like that you can skip them. It's like it doesn't punish you for not wanting to do it if you don't think it's worth it, because it just makes the end boss like super hard or something. Um,
Yeah.
so I think this is just a better version of Tormented, and I think this is a version that could exist as like a permanent, more affix going forward type of thing. I think Encrypted was the same way. That could be an affix that comes back again. I would like to see some of these seasonal affixes like Encrypted or this version of uh, Shrouded and things like that come back and replace some of the weaker weekly affixes that people don't like Necrotic or something like that, and just say this week you have whatever Dragonflight season 1 seasonal affixes plus like on certain weeks, one or two of the weeks you have encrypted and you can kill the Urwo and vibe buffs on certain packs and stuff like that again. But they add, they do add extra time to your dungeon and a little bit extra difficulty on those packs. So it is still like a similar thing where they're beneficial and harmful in certain ways on certain dungeons to some stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a cool idea. I would see how they implement it, but obviously it has to be done first before considering. And then they also made some changes to the dungeons that have already been out. You know, Salia's Gambit and Streets have been adjusted heavily.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember, but when these dungeons first came out, they were very, very
Yeah,
tough.
first week of these dungeons on even just 15s was pretty pretty difficult.
And then as the season went on, you started to see these higher difficulty for the same relevant dungeon. You're like, oh, okay, that particular aspect is overtuned. I remember trying to heal streets, and the only part that actually felt difficult to heal throughout the entirety of the dungeon was the male boss. Like that was
Hmm.
it, and it was like full focus. I don't think that's the worst thing to have like one aspect of the dungeon that's tough, but it was like significantly different. So I'm excited to personally see the fan mail damage reduced,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
that's just me. Um,
As a squishy hunter player, I too am very pleased with that change.
uh, Notable mention: the anchor shot from Time Captain Hooktail no longer scales with fortified. For those that didn't know, if you were on Hooktail, the big dragon pirate thing boss that does the frontal cone, and you've got little ads on the beach that are running up to you. Um, the little hook that would randomly come out, I guess it was from the boat, and it would bring you towards the edge. That the damage, the initial damage as it would hit you, would scale with fortified. So you could be doing a high fort key on a boss and just get one shot if you didn't pop a defensive into that. So it's a little bit kinder, which is cool to see. Um, what else? They're bringing back the world bosses. It looks like so they're going to be um
Yeah, I
empowered.
think you can also get the Covenant conduits from the world bosses when it's their week. But yeah,
Yeah, you're speaking from the position of somebody that doesn't already have 278, and I like
I
that
know
because
I'm
our
just trying to
alts.
be helpful for the people that might not be in my position
Oh, absolutely. No, like
and
all of
might
my
not have played
alts.
season one and like don't know what like are the world bosses worth doing at all? Are they even something to care about? Like, yes, here's the reason you would do them.
Yeah, and it's 100% true for my alts because I on no, the reason I brought it up was because I would never have considered doing the world bosses, and then you brought up the fact that there's covenant conduits. I'm like, oh, I might actually be doing those now, my alts. But and then I did a bunch of class tuning, and the tuning itself, um, I don't know where I stand on it
A lot of this
particularly.
looked to be Mythic Plus focused, and there was a couple PvP changes in here also.
Yeah,
None of this really applies to raid too much. I mean, the Starfall damage definitely does, but like, I don't think it really like Starfall was already the best like spread AOE button kind of in AOE in raids and stuff. So like, this doesn't really change it. I guess it just makes Boomkins like even better on those fights, but it's fine. I don't know. I'm not like mad that they got this change. They desperately needed it for Mythic Plus, so and they did also give good notes in here of like these are just band-aid fixes for the time being. We're like looking to figure out how these specs do AoE in Dragonflight. Like they just said the similar thing for Shadow Priest and stuff like that, where they're like, we recognize that your current AoE gameplay is like not really working how it should. And so
right.
this is just a buff to like make it competitive for now, but like we're gonna be changing it for Dragonflight to make it actually fun and engaging to do and stuff like that. So yeah, overall, good changes, I guess. I'm minor amounts still upset that marksmanship didn't get any single target buff, but if they're only focusing on making Mythic Plus and PvP changes, I guess it's fair. I can't be too mad, but anyway.
It does feel like a very Mythic Plus focused season as well, right? Like with this testing of bringing back all these old dungeons, seeing how
Yeah,
well that
that's
goes.
that's probably fair.
I
That
don't
Mythic Plus
mind.
is more the focus compared to Raid. Yeah.
Yeah, just and it's just for a short season. This is going to be a 3 to 4 month season coming out in August 2nd, right for NA Realms, and you've got they said that the Dragonflight would be released by 22, which I'm still just kind of surprised about, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see. I would not put it past them to delay it. I would hope that they would personally, but
I uh I currently am more optimistic of Dragonflight being ready for 2022. I am getting less and less optimistic that Classic Wrath of the Lich King is going to be ready on is it like September 26th or something?
oh yeah.
That's 2 months away, and there's a lot of bugs on that beta already. And yeah, so that gets me a little bit. I'm more worried for that than I am for Dragonflight. So
Hmm. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I don't personally have a large stake in Classic. I think I leveled to say 55 when it came out, and then I stopped because the people that I was leveling with also stopped. It was just one of those things. kind of all came tumbling down. But at least there was a lot to do in retail at the time, which I really sunk my teeth into. And then the rest of the changes that I'm showing here are ones we'd already talked about in Scarizard's post. There you can see the 10k Cosmic Flux, ridiculous cost. I
Yep.
would hope that it's a lot less than that, but I don't know. That's a lot. And then into the
Um,
PvP changes, but
yeah,
yeah.
I had a question for the set of dungeons for season 4.
Okay.
It's the two Tazvesh dungeons, and then Mechagon, Karazhan, and then Iron Docks and Grimrail Depot. Did you play any of those dungeons when they were like in the current, expansion or whatever? And are you excited to play ones more than the others? What's your experience on them?
So for WoD was a weird expansion where I got to max level and basically logged off. I did not experience a lot of WoD. So I
Yep.
did do the leveling dungeons. Um and I did some max level stuff, but with a lot of my PvP friends quitting the game and stuff like that, that wasn't where my focus was lying. So I had experienced those two dungeons. I've actually been experiencing them a lot this week with the
Is it time walking
experience.
this week?
It's time
Oh,
walking this week, and
yeah.
there is also the bonus experience going live. So I use that to just do a few dungeons on the couple characters I wanted to level up that were both had tank off specs that I could easily get into queues quickly. Learned how to play Vengeance Demon Hunter, learned how to play Prot Warrior, and got into many very quick queues. And it felt like a breeze to get from 50 to 60 is what they were. Um,
Cool.
so really, really like that aspect of it. But as you were saying, I did play those dungeons. It's tough to judge them because in a time walking format, stuff that hurts doesn't really hurt, right?
Yeah,
When
and
we're
Mythic Plus will definitely change stuff too. Yeah, when you're
absolutely
on
like
a timer and yeah.
the need for count because in those
Yes.
dungeons you could just skip whatever you wanted to, um, or skipping as much as you could. So I think that the WoD dungeons have potential. I'm a little fearful of I guess it's Grimrail Depot because your mic's better again. Um, the Grimrail Depot is problematic because of how tight and confined it is. It reminds me of Toldagor, where you were just like in this enclosed space. Camera angles were a really big thing. You just felt trapped. Like imagining that dungeon with Sanguine or with Spiteful, where you're just running back away from where you were to avoid all of this is just insane to me. Um, so I'm interested to see if they make any changes based on how it's going, or if they just kind of take a hands-off approach and just let it go. Um, as for the Legion dungeons, technically I have done them at some point. Definitely don't remember anything about them.
Okay.
And then obviously or I not obviously, but I did play a lot of the Mechagon dungeons, not at a high level, and then Tazvesh at a high level. So kind of ramping in terms of experience for all those.
Gotcha.
I am so excited. I know that Nagura put out some very good uh, survival guide videos for
Yes, I
them.
need to watch those.
Those were actually very helpful.
Cool.
Definitely looking forward to going in, getting KSM on day one of week two type of thing. So that's my goal for sure. How about
Cool.
you?
I had similar, but I'm more of a roller coaster up and down overall. So I didn't play any of Warlords of Draenor, and then like I came back for like the Legion pre-patch basically. So I also technically played the dungeons, but like I've probably played them like less than 10 times total in my life, and I got a very skewed perspective on it. Like I never did the Mythic Plus or anything. I just did them as like heroic dungeons or like you said like time walking stuff. Um so I've played them before and I kind of know roughly how they work, but not really I don't really have an opinion on them. I am also very I don't know whether Grimrail Depot will be. It'll like either be one of two things. It'll either be really short, like a Maw of Souls, like go in, blast, finish the dungeon in like 20 minutes and be out of there, and like cool. Or it's going to be like, this is terrible. I'm dodging Spitefuls and Sanguines, and we're just hiding all over this tiny train, like disaster. So I don't know which of those it'll end up being. I'm hoping the first one, but we'll find out. Iron Docks,
Yeah.
I feel like is not my favorite of the WoD dungeons, but I don't know. I didn't really play most of them, so I didn't really like many of the WoD dungeons. I think in the poll I voted for, was it the Botanica one or something? But that's a Burning Crusade dungeon. It's like, or the Everbloom. I think that's what it was. Anyway, I think that's what I voted for in the poll, but it didn't win, so oh well. Karazhan stuff. I played a lot in Legion. I was playing at the start of Legion, but I played this when it was the Nightbane runs and stuff, where you did like the whole dungeon, or the speed run of like the first half of the dungeon. So I know Lower Karazhan pretty well, but I never played it when it was a Mythic Plus season either because I had stopped playing Legion at that point. I didn't play BFA at all. I have no idea what any of the Mechagon stuff does, so I definitely need to watch videos for those because I haven't done them a single time. And then Tazavesh, yeah, I'm whatever competent enough on from current Shadowlands.
Yeah. Guides will be super helpful for sure. Looking forward to kind of experiencing all of them. Um, but what I will say, I think the one point that we still hadn't touched on was the whole slime cat thing.
Okay,
So
yes.
for those that didn't see, basically if you kill all of the bosses on relevant difficulties, being normal, heroic, and mythic, you will get different rewards. And it can't just be for like only Nathria, you have to do it for all three of the raids. So a total of 31 boss kills for normal, heroic, and mythic. You will get so normal, the reward is this slime cat. So instead of locking the mount reward for this season behind the last mythic boss as a drop rate, where 2 drop at a time, they know it's going to be
Or AOTC where it's on heroic,
or
like
OTC. You're right.
the
Yep.
jailer mount. Yeah.
It's now just behind normal, and you just get it if you finish off those normal bosses. So like an easier version, essentially, of a mass achievement run. You could view it as right. Just kill
Yep.
them in whatever way possible, but you have to do it for the 31
It's like
bosses that
the
are out.
faded affix is the achievement condition kind of on
That's
every boss.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. And so the normal reward is the slime cat. For heroic, you get the relevant season title, and then the mythic one is raid teleports, which I think is a reasonable ascension in terms of not only difficulty but relevant reward. And I like that the more casual setting is locked behind the normal as opposed to mythic. Now I will say there's been some controversy. A lot of people are frustrated because there was some tooltip or something like that where it said on any difficulty, whereas the
Right.
difficulties were actually in reference to normal, heroic, or mythic because LFR isn't a difficulty. You can't right click your character and change difficulty to LFR. You actually just queue into LFR.
Right.
So there were individuals that, I guess they are trying to avoid going into a normal run and getting the slime cat. So I wonder how much more toxic normal runs will be as a result of kind of almost forcing these two communities to join together time around.
Yeah. People have some weird takes here where they feel like it's like because it's not available in LFR, it's like gatekeeping and like some weird elitism thing that like let me just make this clear. Nobody clearing normal has any elitism over LFR, okay? If they claim to do, they are delusional. Like that does not exist. So, I don't know where that even comes from, but um yeah, to me, I don't really understand the controversy at all. Like you said, it's that reward previously would have been for heroic or mythic, so they're only ever making it easier and making it more accessible. I do think the mount being more accessible is like fine. I don't I don't have any positive or negative feelings towards it. It's I mean, we're rating all the difficulties anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter which difficulty has which reward for us realistically. Um I actually think they could swap mythic and heroic and put the teleports available for heroic people and have the title only for mythic, and that would make a little more sense to me. Like I feel like the higher you go, the less relevant the reward should be to like actual gameplay, if that makes sense. Um, and so the title is like completely meaningless, but you can still get the actual gameplay functioning stuff if you're only doing heroic, and I feel like that's completely fair. Like I don't feel a need to have the elitism over the raid teleports either. I hope those are account wide. Please make those account wide. I beg of you. I don't want to have to do mythic on multiple characters to be able to go back and do transmog runs easily or something. Um, yeah, I don't really understand this controversy at all. I like the slime cat mount. That's all I got.
Yeah, Cat Mountain looked pretty good. I'm excited
Thumbs
to
up.
have it, and I'm
Give
more
more slime animal mounts. The end.
yeah, that'd be kind of cool. I like that they've kind of slowly brought in all the one or most of the ones that people were voting on at the start
Hmm.
of the expansion. So
Yep, we got the spell tome. We got the treant dude that changes with the seasons, and
there
I
was
forget.
no
I think there
caterpillar.
was.
There was no
I,
caterpillar, but there was an homage to it on the tree mount. If you look at the back of
I
it, the
still
little
think a caterpillar might come eventually.
yeah, it could come eventually, but we'll
They've been
see.
doing like one of those per season, so maybe Dragonflight season 1 we'll find a caterpillar mount somewhere.
Yeah, very fitting with dragons. Who knows? But we'll see. But I'm realizing now that next episode of this podcast, I will probably have to change the background because currently it is the
Oh,
entrance
we can get the
to.
Castle Nathria background.
We could get
Yes.
the Castle Nathri background. We could do a bunch of different ones, whatever we want to do.
We could
But
get Mechagon background. Who knows?
it needs to change, so that is coming. But that is it for today.